Is holiday season the time to find common ground with your family members who are politically different than you? Probably not. Probably not. But these conversations come up whether we like it or not sometimes. So I want to share a little bit of my knowledge on how to talk politics at all, if you do, during the holidays. Welcome back to Stay at Home Feminist. Your soft girl era starts here, along with the fall of the patriarchy. I am your host, Cece Bings, your favorite feminist with a TikTok addiction. I'm currently getting over this cold. I don't know if you guys got this cold that I got. I feel like everybody's getting it. It started with a sore throat, then like head cold, and it just like won't go away. And I feel pretty much fine, but I just have this like lingering cough. So all that to say is I have holes in my mouth right now. I have a throat lozenge in my mouth because it's hard for me to talk at length without coughing. So that's annoying because I'm a yapper, professional yapper at that. So been hard out here for your girl, but all in all, we're fine. Today, we're talking a little bit about deep canvassing, which you may or may not have heard of. Deep canvassing really exploded after AOC got elected because it really showed people in the space new ways to talk to folks who were just not interested in voting or maybe felt like they already made up their minds. But once they did the deep canvassing approach, became clear that their minds weren't made up. The reason I want to talk about deep canvassing, because you're not going to be canvassing. I mean, if you want to go canvass, do that, girl. Love that for you. But you're probably not going to be canvassing around the Christmas dinner table, or on the holidays with your family, whatever holidays you celebrate. But the concepts of deep canvassing is really, really what you can take to create the kind of conversation that actually works when a loved one disagrees with you politically or when it comes to values or human rights. So let's get into a little bit of a holiday survival kit and a little bit of a strategy guide for you when it comes to this. And I will also talk about boundaries and shutting this kind of thing down, because just because you know how to talk about politics doesn't mean you want to do that all the time. So that's an option too. We'll get to that later in the episode. There's just such a deep, wide gap between different political ideologies. And we're like getting news from different places. And there's so much misinformation out there. It seems harder and harder to be able to have any kind of conversation around things that a lot of us hold very important to our hearts and ourselves and our morals and all of that. And it can be very hard with certain family members, especially when it seems like they are not willing to take in any new information. And that's why I want to dive into some deep canvassing strategies here. I have spent some good chunks of my life as a canvasser, phone banking during elections. I don't know if you guys can hear that thunder, but it's like rolling thunder. It's so loud. There's a storm outside. Okay, sorry. It keeps distracting me. My dog is also scared of thunder. So every time it thunders, I'm like, where's my girl? Is she okay? Okay. Anyways, ADHD today. Geez. I have spent a lot of my life canvassing. Well, maybe not a lot of my life, but I have quite a bit of experience canvassing through different types of causes, different types of goals. And deep canvassing in particular is really a special way to really connect with people you might not. In the 2020 election, I did phone banking for an organization called People's Action. And we were calling all of the swing states, and so many people answer. If you've ever been a phone banker, you know that they're like, stop calling me, especially if it's swing states, because everyone is trying to reach out to them during that time. So understandably, they're annoyed. But when you do get to talk to someone, especially someone who is like moderate or who is also willing to talk, and you use these strategies, you really do see the breakthrough. When I was deep canvassing during that election, we were like, okay, we aren't trying to talk to someone like who is wearing a MAGA hat. And basically, there are certain people that no matter what Trump does, Trump could assault their family member and their best friend, and they still wouldn't care. You know what I mean? I'm trying to think of the most awful thing ever. It seems like there's a demographic of people that no matter what this administration does, they find a way to reason with it, or they come up with some narrative that's not true. I actually just posted recently about when Trump called that reporter Piggy, and I have flooded in my comments, everyone going, no, he called her Peggy. Her name's Peggy. Her name's Margaret. Peggy's a nickname for Margaret. Her name was Catherine. Like, what are you guys talking about? What viral Facebook post of misinformation did you guys all get? Because that's not real. And I often see that in my comments. I honestly don't surround myself with a lot of people who have very different politics than me. I'm such a political person. And I just feel like just throughout time, I've just sort of really like don't have that many people in my life who aren't in the realm of my politics. Maybe they don't totally agree. Maybe they're not as liberal as me, but I don't have any like MAGA hat wearing people in my life that I see regularly, especially in like my immediate family and stuff. So I think it can be very different. It's also different with family because I feel like parental dynamics, sibling dynamics, whatever, there's already like so much there to trigger you at the holidays. So throw this, sprinkle politics in and ruh-roh. So, but yeah, anyways, I love deep canvassing. I think everyone who cares about talking about politics should know how to use these tools, because I think so often when we are arguing with someone we love about politics, it's not because we want to embarrass them or own them or be right. You know, it's because we love this person and we want a good relationship with them. And we are like, oh my gosh, if you really support these things, it's going to be hard for me to keep this trust in this relationship with you because you're supporting like atrocities right now. Let's talk about it, because I fear you may not be getting all the information. You know, I think it comes from this place of trying to see eye to eye, being scared that they're just getting all this information from these not valid sources. And it goes both ways. I feel like they see our news as fake news. It's a mess right now. It's a mess. Things are crazy. So when we are talking about politics with people, I think rule number one is like only engage in sort of this good faith conversation. And you too, like that's for you too. Like don't show up being like, oh, I can't wait to, you know, make them feel dumb or whatever, because that's not what we're learning to do today. And, you know, if it gets there, just because you start a conversation with someone doesn't mean you have to end it. If you try to talk sensibly with someone and shit gets insulting or you enter into crazy town, like you can just be like, all right, thanks, we tried. I'm ready to wrap this up. And again, we'll get into the boundaries of it all later in this episode. But, you know, we're just in such a state of division right now as a country. Politics are literally ripping families apart like never before. And I think it's because a lot of us aren't getting the same facts. We're not getting the same news. We can't agree on what is credible news right now. We can't agree on what is facts right now. And it's making it harder and harder for us to relate and to connect. So this is for the people who just want to find a way, maybe not even to convince anyone of anything, but just to be able to share how you're feeling and plant seeds for someone who they may or may not water and grow themselves. You know, they have to do that on their own. But here's a way that you can maybe extend that to them and have a conversation without it just being like an explosion of fake news and BS. Talking politics with anyone who has such differing beliefs than you can be difficult, is especially true when it's family, because there's like family lore that goes into this, you know? It's like the Venn diagram of like identity and power and childhood trauma. Trying to paint my Venn diagram here for you. They do like a full collision. And for most people, political beliefs feel logical, but they're actually very emotional. They're very attached to deep-seated feelings. And often, as we're seeing today, especially fears people have. Fear of change or desire for stability or loyalty to tradition or just your sense of identity and belonging, you know? All of these things on any side of the aisle or anywhere in between really do play a fact into why we are so passionate about politics and why it can be really hard to hear people out, but also share really how you feel with people without being defensive or harsh or like talking down to them. It can be really hard to be civil when talking about this topic because it is so important and it feels so extreme right now in this moment. But when, you know, Uncle only watches Fox News says something wild about immigrants, he probably isn't thinking about actual policy. He's thinking that the world he understands is being threatened. And not that I make it an excuse for that or the bullshit ICE is doing or the, you know, propaganda that this administration is putting out, because it's atrocious. But I'm just trying to point out like the pattern so we can break it. So if someone's sitting there thinking about how something threatens their identity or their safety, when you push back, it probably makes them feel like their identity is wrong. Of course, they're going to get defensive. And beyond politics, just, you know, and general rule of thumb for any kind of conversation. And if you're like me and you're very political, I've been arguing with family members about politics since I was like 12. Eventually, you kind of learn that like being in debate mode doesn't work. Giving lectures doesn't work. Facts don't always work because it's not facts that we're disputing. It's not just logical. It's very emotional. And I think a lot of the reasons that doesn't work is because people don't want to feel dumb or judged or alone. So what does work? Deep canvassing is what works. If you want to talk to your family about politics during the holidays, deep canvassing is the way to go. Deep canvassing is a relationship-based persuasion method that's built on listening first, telling real personal stories, and asking curious, open-ended questions. It's not gotcha questions. It's not let me educate you speeches. It's not like debating as you do in YouTube comment sections in person. Like, it's none of that energy. It's more about two human beings connecting over lived experience. The goal isn't to win. The goal is to open the door, have the door be slightly left ajar for you, just enough for someone to rethink, or maybe later, look back on some of the stuff you said and just be able to consider it, whether they agree with you or not. Because so often we're at a place where it's like, the sky is blue. No, the sky is red. And then where do you go from there? Instead, it's like, the sky is blue. Well, I see the sky is red. Okay, well, why is the color of the sky important to you? Like finding ways to build on conversation and not just like boom, 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 and really come together. And we've seen this method work. We've seen it increase voter support for trans rights. And we've seen it improve people's willingness to engage again in politics when they may have felt just like disillusioned and over it. And not because it's manipulative. We're not trying to like manipulate or trick people, but it is empathy based. And empathy is just naturally very disarming. And again, a lot of this, as I briefly mentioned, is about listening too. So I think that's why it's great when thinking about talking about politics with family members or loved ones, because it is also, you get to practice listening and hearing where they're coming from and why they think what they think. Again, the point isn't for you to hear what they have to say and be like, oh, I agree with everything. Boom. It's to hear each other out, to be able to gain some understanding about why each other even feels this way is sort of where it is. And then that's like step one, to be able to build our larger conversation around this and sharing opinions and stories and da-da-da-da-da. Okay, here's your strategy for talking to a family member about politics over the holidays. Number one, lead with curiosity, not judgment. Even if they say ludicrous shit that make you want to judge them. Like, you can judge them on the inside. Don't judge them on the outside. If they spew a Fox News BS take that isn't true, or is so propagandized that it's basically misinformation at this point, instead of being like, how the can you even believe that? You could try saying, when did you start feeling strongly about that? Again, it's building the conversation and having these judgment-free, open-ended questions. Curiosity leads to people feeling safe. Safety leads to this openness that we're seeking, that we're trying to obtain here. The second thing you want to do when talking to a loved one who's on the other side of the political aisle is share vulnerable and real stories with them. Stories transform the way people think. They humanize some of the policy. Statistics don't. Especially when we're in a moment where this group thinks that every statistic this group has comes from fake news BS who's all out to get the other group or whatever, If you're talking about trans rights, you can share a real story about your non-binary friend, your queer friend, your trans friend, and how scary it can be for them being in a public space and wanting to use the restroom that feels safest to them. If you're talking about immigration, you can share a story about your coworker or friend or someone that who is an immigrant and the way that this administration's atrocious policies has harmed them and their family. Like personal, emotional, real stories. There's so many real stories, unfortunately, of the repercussions we're seeing today, from healthcare prices rising to ICE kidnapping people and family members not knowing where their families are, to trans people who don't get to have the gender that they're associated with on their passport anymore. Share a real story with them. And a great way to find common ground with people is after you share the story, invite them to reflect on a time that, maybe they don't have immigrant friends or they're not trans and they can't relate to that experience. But, you could ask them something like, have you ever felt left out or judged for who you are? Because even if you can't relate to every experience of every person, especially if you don't know people like that and you just hear this scary stuff in the news about how like blue-haired liberals are coming to get you, it can be hard to get how not real this threat is. But when you tell real stories and then you connect it back to the person and have them reflect on times where they had food insecurity or they went through something hard or they felt misunderstood, it does open them up to hopefully be able to make that connection to people who they don't know their lived experience and they can't relate to that, but they can relate to common themes there. If you get what I'm saying. Another great tool to use when talking to a loved one who's on a different side of the political aisle is to listen to them. A lot of times, conversations about politics can be very difficult to have because neither people are listening. They're both trying to make their point. And to be able to create a safe space to have this conversation, you have to be willing to listen. You have to be willing to hear them out. That doesn't mean you have to agree with them. If you want them to hear you, you got to be able to set that tone and lead by example and hear them out. And a great tool for this after hearing them out is to reflect what you hear back to them. You know, you don't have to agree with Uncle Billy Bob's stance on gun ownership, but you can understand and say something like, it sounds like you really care about safety, you know, and then that can connect to what you care about when it comes to safety, whether that's your bodily autonomy, whether that's you want your kids to be able to go to school and not be scared of active shooters. You want your kid to be able to go to school without a backpack that can also act as a bulletproof vest, which is they're making child-sized bulletproof vests at this point. You know, it's gotten out of hand. But again, it's not about your stats and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, because then it feels like it's so easy to be defensive when someone's on the attack. And it can be so hard not to, especially when you really care about this stuff. I struggle with that too. But when people feel seen, they're more likely to let their guard down and then actually listen to what you have to say. If you're talking to a loved one this holiday season who does not live in your realm of the political spectrum, try creating a value bridge with them. A value bridge is essentially something where you affirm the values and not the argument they're making. So, for example, you could say something like, we both want this country to be safe. We just have different ideas about how to get there. Creating that bridge. We both have the same interests. We both care about America. We want it to be safe. We just have different ideas of what that path looks like. And this is actually a great one because this applies to so many things with what our administration is doing when it comes to budget cuts or ICE raids or, basically everything they're doing. I think another great thing you can do is also just like not word vomit at people. It can be so hard when you are so passionate about something, but when you start creating this safe space and you really want to be like, all right, I got a lot to say here. Don't just like say it. Ask them, especially if they've just shared something vulnerable about the way they're feeling or what their fears are or what's important to them. Ask them if you can share another perspective. Say, can I share another perspective? Could I give insight on what that feels like for me or whatever it is? And if they say no, don't. You know, like there's no point in having a conversation with someone who doesn't want to hear you. So see, and then I do find that people who say yes, they are more willing to listen because they feel like they signed up for this conversation. They don't feel like they're just being talked down to or talked at. It's so important not to shame, mock, or even like diagnose people. You know, it's really easy for me to look at some of the BS I see and go, MAGA is a cult. It's not helpful to say that to someone who may or may not be in that cult. Shame triggers defensiveness. Mocking like shuts the conversation up in the worst way. Calling someone fascist because they may or may not be supporting fascist ideals, even though it may be true, isn't going to get them to hear what you have to say. It's going to make them defensive. And they're not going to sit there and be like, you're right, I am a fascist. If they haven't gotten to that conclusion already, you calling them that I don't think is going to help. But these strategies are just that. They're strategies. They're not foolproof. Every conversation, every person is different. And when people want to be unhinged, they're going to be unhinged. So be ready to also not need to finish this conversation just because you started it. If they start being disrespectful, you can set a boundary. You can say something like, this is important, so let's talk about it in a way that makes everyone feel comfortable. If they're not able to use the right pronouns or use the respectful terms for certain things or whatever it is, that's a great example of when you could sort of set a boundary of like, okay, I really want to talk to you about this, but it's hard if you're not going to do this in a way that makes me feel safe and comfortable. And if they keep disrespecting that boundary, like you don't have to finish that conversation. Again, like back to what I was saying in the beginning of this, where it's like the point of deep canvassing is to find common ground. Common ground may not be possible with people who live in a space that is so committed to that being the only way to look at things. So you also have to have the discernment of like, who am I able to create this safe space with to find common ground? Because it's not all up to you. That person has to be willing to hear you out and be vulnerable and be a part of it as well. And if not, let's pause, time to go eat some dessert, and then peace out and don't talk to them anymore. Or just say like, if you're getting heated, like I need a quick breather, I'll be right back. You don't have to set off your flight or fight just trying to have a conversation with someone. A lot of people have like political contention within their family. It's been going on for a while. Probably isn't the first time you've tried to talk about it with them. So feel free to also say something that's like, could we talk about this after the holidays? I really want today to feel good. Letting them know that like, I do want to talk about this with you, but like, nah, not right now. Protect your peace. You don't owe anyone a debate. And I think it's all about the balance, because you're not going to flip someone's whole identity with a conversation, especially someone who is very entrenched in their views. But you may be able to plant a seed, and you may be able to understand where they come from, which can help your relationship, even if you don't agree with each other. Just being able to understand why they think what they think, even if you don't support it or agree with it, can help you yourself find compassion and connect to that instead of judgment when it comes to this loved one. And I think it really does plant that seed that can also let you both know that you want to preserve that connection, that you want to meet each other with empathy first and not judgment. And maybe it will lead to someone voting differently or listening to you differently or treating someone differently. And that's why this kind of gentle activism matters so much, because it can have such an amazing ripple effect. And even with you trying to practice these tools, again, it's not all up to you. And just remember, you don't have to have that conversation. What do you do with family members who are always trying to get your goat when it comes to politics? And it's like, bro, let's not do that. Let's not even try. We know we're not going to see eye to eye. Let's not even. You are allowed to opt out. Deep canvassing is a choice, not an obligation. If talking politics with certain family members drains your soul, like you don't have to do it. You can just say no thanks. If that is the case and you go into something being like, guys, don't talk to me about this from jump, you might want to think about setting boundaries ahead of time. You know, saying something like, I'm so excited to see everyone. Just FYI, I'm not comfortable discussing politics this year. Or if someone brings it up to you, just say like, I could really use a break from heavy topics over the holidays. I just want to enjoy my time with you. Whatever protects your energy, do that. Good, clear boundaries are not passive aggressive. So they have like a clear meaning. There's no hidden agenda there. They're consistent. They don't falter when they're challenged. They don't have exceptions. And good boundaries are connected to your well-being. You don't need permission. You don't need a perfect script. Friendly holiday reminder: women and marginalized people are often assigned the emotional labor of keeping peace and correcting harm. This holiday, you get to choose what role you play in that, if you even play one at all. If you want to engage in deep political conversation with a loved one, great. If you want to disengage and enjoy your pumpkin pie in silence, that's political too, girl. Rest is resistance. And boundaries are like a love language to yourself. So protect your peace too. And there's no wrong way to keep the peace. So just, you got this. Holidays can be tough for a lot of reasons. It can be stressful, lots going on. Being back in your childhood bedroom really has some people reverting. And again, the state of the nation right now is really intense with how deeply entrenched politics feels, how personal it feels in our lives right now. So be gentle with yourself, give yourself grace, whatever that looks like for you. This was just a quick little, here's an option of what you can do. If you are the type of person who knows you're going to be having these conversations, really consider the deep canvassing approach. Deepcanvassing.com is a great page that can tell you more about it. People's Action is a great organization. They do a lot of deep canvassing if you want to get involved outside of your family or just learn more about it, or just Google deep canvassing. I'm sure you'll find what you need to find. But yeah, I hope this was helpful, and I hope everyone just has a very restful, peaceful holiday season. Thank you so much for joining today's episode of Stay at Home Feminist. We love having you here. I hope this was helpful. Please like, comment, subscribe. We're a new show still a new show technically. And we want to know what you're thinking of our episodes. And please let us know what else you want me to discuss. I'd happily discuss it. And if you have any questions about deep canvassing, of course, comment, let me know. I'm happy to clarify, because this is very much like 101. I try to keep it really light and actionable. I didn't want you to feel like you needed a pen and paper to talk about it. So yeah, I hope this was helpful. If not, thanks for listening anyways. And hope your conversations, whatever they're about, go well this holiday season. Sending you love and light and feminist power. Thanks for joining. Bye.